afternoon, and thank you so much for coming out on this pretty torrid, wet day. We're really grateful to have you here. So this event has been organised to coincide with LGBT History Month, which falls every February in the UK, and it's an opportunity to explore our past, our collective past, through the historicisation of our lives. And we try and organise something every year, and this year it just so happens we have a beautiful collection of speakers for you that represent, I think, some of the brightest lights in Merseyside in terms of their action, their politics, their research. I want to thank all of our speakers for coming today and sharing their wisdom with you. I also really need to thank, in particular, Moni and Holly for continuing to support events like this that we think up on the back of a beer mat and then things happen, and it always happens really well, and I'm really grateful. So thank you very much to Moni and Holly for doing that. And for their ongoing support as well. I also need to give you a little bit of housekeeping. So fire safety, if there is a fire alarm, please calmly head towards the nearest fire exit. It's at the back of the building, the assembly point, on what we call Pownell Square. There will be fire marshals on hand to direct you if we have a fire alarm, and it's a proper fire, and we'll provide support for evac chair users as well. Toilets are located on the 4th floor and can be accessed via the staircase just outside of this room, so that door there. There are lifts along the corridor as well. There are gender-neutral toilets on the 1st floor and the ground floor. There are male-accessible toilets on the 3rd floor and female-accessible toilets on the 4th floor. There is a quiet contemplation space, prayer space as well. That's in room 502, so that's along the 5th floor corridor, nearly there. Refreshments, so teas, coffees, waters will be available throughout this afternoon in rooms 504 and 505, just been in there, so please help yourself. Could you turn your mobile phones off or onto vibrate or silent, please, so we're not interrupted. There is a bit of construction going on, some renovations and things. If there is any kind of disruptive noise, apologies, it's quiet at the moment, but we may get a little bit of activity, so if we are interrupted, I'm sorry for that, it's out of our control. It's raining though, so they probably won't be out there. Yeah. And finally, filming. We are filming today, but we're only filming the backs of people's heads and the speakers. If you don't want the back of your head to be captured, then please let one of our team know. That would be really helpful, and then we can make sure that you're not. Okay. So I've done my bit. What I want to do now then is to introduce Professor Phil Vickerman to you all. He is the Pro-Vice Chancellor of Strategic Initiatives and is a Professor of Inclusive Education and Learning. He's standing in for the Vice Chancellor today. We're really kind of grateful that he's come along to introduce our event, so please give him a round of applause.
Good afternoon, everybody. I can certainly confirm the back of my head looks better than the front, so don't feel you have to comment on that. Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to speak, and both on behalf of Professor Ian Campbell, the Vice Chancellor, and as a member of the Executive Leadership Team. I'm very proud that LJMU is hosting this event as part of our celebration of LGBT History Month. And in particular, as Emma has said, we've got some absolutely fantastic speakers here with us today, and I'm certainly looking forward to hearing about their experiences, their stories. So thank you very much for giving your time to be with us today. I think it's really important that we have forums like today to have time to stop, to think, to debate key issues. That's absolutely important, and also issues that affect all of our university community, whoever that may well be, who are working together, studying together, and also look at how we can embrace our work and study by recognising difference, diversity, dignity, respect, regardless of people's protected characteristics. That's something that's really important personally to me, and I know it's something that's important to the university. The contribution of our LGBT staff and student network continues to promote LGBT equality in the university, and I think it's always been invaluable and will continue to be invaluable in sharing people's experiences, but helping the university look at what we need to do as well to embrace LGBT issues. Just a little bit about the university. We now have equality champions in all of our faculties and our professional service areas, and that's really to ensure that equality, diversity, inclusivity issues are absolutely embedded right across the organisation. I think that's something that's absolutely critical for us going forward. It is vital that we have policies and we have processes, but what I'm particularly interested in is we can have all the policies and all the processes in the world, but what we need to see is impact and change and action. Sometimes policies and processes don't do that. The policies and the processes bit can be the easy bit, but actually making that difference, making that impact, and people feeling valued and embraced within the LJMU family is something that is very, very important. Just a few things I'd like to maybe highlight about LJMU and some of the key activities around LGBT equality. We do ensure that all our LGBT staff are able to access the Stonewall Talent Programme to develop their leadership skills. That's something that I'm personally very passionate about, and I think I've certainly, talking to colleagues, seen the positive impact that is making. We also have work undertaken by our LGBTIQ Research Hub, and again, we're a university, so we do reflect, we do research, we do looking at evidence, and looking at the things that can really make a change. We also promote all of our LGBT activities right across the community, but also out into our community, and I think that's something which is fantastic that friends and colleagues here in this room are doing, not only to look at what we're doing to shape and influence what happens in Liverpool John Moores University, but also what we can do as a community to help our friends and colleagues. I just want to highlight something that I thought was interesting. Well, two things. One, I've just got on Twitter. I've come into the 18th century, and as you do, I'm also leading the sustainability and climate emergency. So I was in my car, which is a very eco-friendly car, parked at stopped at the end of the M58 at Switch Island, and I decided to tweet. It's not very often that you see a rainbow at the end of Switch Island, and 2 or 3 days later that rainbow meant something, because Moni asked if I would come and speak at this. I didn't find a crock of gold, Moni, sorry about that, but that was something I thought, wow, this maybe means something. This is But the other thing I wanted to talk about, and I don't know if people have seen it, and I thought it's funny how things come together. On Monday of this week, Stonewall have released a report of research conducted with Britain Thinks, and I've not had a chance to read it in any detail, but it's the first piece of research that has been done exploring the in-depth lived experiences of LGBT people, particularly people that are not in education, employment or training, and looking at understanding some of the issues for that. So it's the first of its kind. Some of the highlights that it's pulled up as big issues is around bullying and discrimination, whether that's at school or whether it's in a workplace or in the community. Sometimes lack of family, lack of home support, and also the devastating impact some of these can have on people's mental health and well-being. And I just thought it was fantastic that, you know, in this month of celebrating that piece of research has come out, and I'm certainly going to make sure that, you know, we look at that within Liverpool John Moores University, and have a look at where some of the barriers are for young people in education. But also, you know, there'll be a lot of lessons for us to learn from our community in our university education, and looking at some of the barriers there as well. So, just to summarise, really looking forward to listening to everybody. LGBT is certainly an issue that Liverpool John Moores University will continue to champion. We will sponsor, we will speak out as an institution when we need to do. And I think that's important, that as an institution we also have developed an initiative called Respect Always. I've got my badge, and there's other people that have got Respect Always badges. Now again, that's the easy bit, having a badge that says Respect Always. But, you know, I've certainly made a commitment to myself and to others that, you know, if I see things or I hear about things, you know, I want to call it out. Now, it might be easier for me to call it out as a Pro-Vice Chancellor, but I want to encourage and empower all of our students, staff, if there are things that they're feeling uncomfortable about, that they don't feel is right, you know, I will support them, and I know colleagues on the executive will support them to call it out. Thank you very much, and I look forward to this afternoon. Oh yes, sorry, I forgot. Yeah, the next speaker, sorry, is it Christian? Yeah? Who is it? Claire, sorry, I do apologise. The most important bit. Yeah, it's my pleasure to introduce Claire and Sandra, who are going to do the next presentation. Sorry about that. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Oh, right, okay. Sorry, thank you.
Hello. I feel like I'm hidden. I'm safe. I feel all safe and secure behind the screen. No one could see me. I'm glad it says poetry, prose, pride and plays, because I just happen to have been writing poetry since I was 14. So I feel like obviously it is part of my LGBT history. So I'm going to start with a poem. Most women I know are ordinary. They'd say they weren't feminists. Be scared to go out alone at night. They never stop worrying about money for the tea, money for bills, money for clothes. They keep the bottom going in this world so the top stays in place, so the whole fucking world stays in place. Don't think they're weak. They're strong enough to look after this world with all its problems. Most women I know mend for, cook for, clean for, compensate for, pick up the broken pieces of this world. Most women I know are ordinary. They'd say they weren't intellectuals. They iron other people's clothes, have been kicked by someone bigger in one way or another. They never have time not to think. They hope through their children, through their energy, through the good times that they have. Most women I know have unrealised power, broken confidence, don't know how much they know when they say they know nothing, could seriously change things, make the world better. Most women I know keep the bottom going in this world so the top stays in place, so the whole fucking world stays in place. I wrote that poem when I was about 20, and it was a bit different for me, because I think it took me till about 20 till I started thinking that there was women's issues in the world, because I grew up as a young person very much under the influence of my father, who, ironically, my first political activity at the age of about 7 was helping him fold leaflets saying no to the common market. And then we used to go post them through all the houses in Devon, which is quite ironic for me now, because I'm very much a Remain. My heart was very much Remain in Europe, but I think it says to me about how over time things can change. And I think growing up in the late 70s and becoming involved in my community during that period, and also in the 80s, meant that I had a fantastic political upbringing, which, you know, and I look today at young people today and think they haven't had this same political upbringing, because my youth was all about demonstrations, and the issues in my youth were things like, let's all go to Greenham Common, Stonewall, let's all go to the Stonewall demo in Manchester, because as the banners in them days said, we're never going underground. And that was all in a reaction to Section 28, which I'm sure you're aware of. We started our own People's March for Jobs in Liverpool. We went on demonstrations about apartheid, the miners' strikes. So from this very community-based upbringing and quite political youth, I then went into a career, really, very successful career, as both a community development worker, a youth worker, and later a manager of public services. And the Thatcher era was very difficult. There was a lot of poverty, but what we were all about in our communities, in our activism, was how can we change this world. And so we used to have meetings on housing estates where 20 women would all get in the front room, and we'd discuss what can we do to change, to make our lives better. And we had campaigns and demonstrations and lots of action, and not without success. We've had housing estates demolished, we've had youth projects established, a lot of great changes taking place. As a community development worker, I was privileged to be a part of all them services and all them things that happened. But what I'd also have to say, that as a lesbian, I came out as a lesbian at 20. I think I was 19 before I knew there was such a thing as lesbians. Because I came out in Netherton, and it was hardly a place where there was, not only in my community but in this society, there was no lesbian visibility in my youth. So it was almost like my mates were like, oh yeah, right, all right, what's that? So it was a different context. But not having any voice as a lesbian, or there not being many things or many role models, was quite difficult. One of the things that I managed to feel, and it links to the first speaker here about research, When I was a senior person in the youth service in Sefton, one of the things I was determined to do was to develop lesbian LGBT plus services for young people. Because like the stone rail research that's been coming out today, there was lots of research coming out at the time as well, and it was all around bullying in schools, mental health, alcoholism. So what we did was just one of the things we did was we took, we had 20 young people eventually in our youth group, although that did take about 4 years. So we repeated some of this research with some of the young people that we were working with. And out of the 20 young people, you can imagine 99% had suffered homophobic bullying in school. More worryingly, I think about 11% were using drugs and alcohol, 7% were self-harming. So the impact of homophobia then and today, and I just think it's there today, but it's different. Although we have come a long way. One of the things I was involved in was campaigning within the Children's Society. I worked within the Children's Society for a number of years, and they had a project which was around fostering and adopting at-risk vulnerable young people. It was linked into a big homeless project they had, and there was a refusal to allow lesbian or gay adults to adopt or foster. So we started a massive campaign in the Children's Society through the youth, through the trade union, which then became a massive campaign in the country. And so I can look back now and think, I can remember when we weren't allowed to foster and adopt, and now we can have children. So we have come a great way, but that is in no way an invitation for us to become complacent. Enough about my passion for social change. I met on the 17th of January 2014. I walked into a meeting in Knowsley where a very creative woman who you're about to meet in about 2 minutes was running a project called Big Love Sister. And I was one of the leaders on that project, and I can honestly say it was a life-changing moment for me, because it was like being back in the 80s when we used to have meetings every 5 minutes, when it felt a lot more focused, and it felt for me anyway that there was a lot more activity. And I think one of the things that sort of struck me more about this project was that it wasn't just about looking at yourself in relation to the external world, but also maybe looking a little bit inside yourself and thinking, who are you and where have you come from, and what is your contribution? And so that was very difficult, but was very, very, very revealing. And it went on to be a forerunner for many other projects. And I think, just in summary, it's about listening, having the opportunity to tell your story, having it heard, having it seen. Sounds simple, but major importance. And so this whole project and this whole world was about us sharing our stories, which I think, today is brilliant because it's given us a chance to share our stories. And I think, having spent my whole life really well paid, I will say, but having spent my whole life campaigning and initiating things to try and make this community and society of ours a little bit more accepting of everyone, especially of diversity. It was a different thing for me to start thinking, well, maybe now this is the time for me to start looking into myself. And what about my little girl? And I wrote a poem round about them, which I'll read you now. Little girl, star eyes, dream heart. I hold her, I hold the light of morning. Play games that giggle innocence, ingenuity, joy, imagination. This is her wisdom. Ancestral thread eyes look into mine. Gifts drop, gifts shine. Her natural salutation is to skip, to shriek at fear. Wide-eyed, untangled purity. I have stepped through broken, enough to know little girls live the beginning and end of moments all at once. And just to finish, I've had like at least 17 quick save carrier bags under my bed by the time I was 50 with lots and lots of poems that I'd carried on writing all my life. And inspired by the wonderful Claire, when I was forced to leave work about over 2 years ago now, because I was diagnosed with secondary terminal breast cancer, I thought, well, maybe I should do something for me little girl. And maybe I should do something with this poetry. And maybe this poetry will be a way of me trying to find and recognise my own voice again. Because my voice, I think, and my definition in the world was always through my job, which is now gone. So now I'm standing here thinking, how do I reinvent myself now? What's my activism now? What's my politics now? And that's pretty much where I am at the moment. But I just want to read you to finish this tiny little ditty. And I wrote this when I was 14 in the throes of Bootle, in the nightmare of the 70s, early 80s. Take that pen out of your hand. You don't know what you understand. Talk a load of emotion about life and death and pain, desire and idealism. It will send you insane because you can't take the facts away. Persecution every day. A war of words in Parliament. No money left to pay the rent. Sons and daughters swimming in acid waters. Choices losing. Is the truth so confusing? Worry in your bed at night and hope for the strength to fight, for the power to turn it around against this truth of pain we found. And I think, through my community over the last 30, now I'm a lesbian history, I feel great. Over the last 30, 40 years, I think we have managed to turn it around a lot. And there's no one more capable of turning lives around, trust me, from my own personal experience, than the absolutely wonderful Claire Jasmine Beloved, who I hope I haven't took too much of your time.
I'm just trying to see if am I live? Yes. She said, Holly said, do you want the podium or do you want to waft? I always want to waft. So I'll talk fast because I know we're running over. I think it's great that, probably not on purpose, but we were asked to do this, and then we looked at the title, the overarching title, and it was poetry and creativity and gorgeousness, so it's kind of good that we're here with our poetry. 26 years ago, I came back from Leeds Uni to Liverpool. I was very depressed and lost. I'd wanted to stay in Leeds, but there was no jobs. No, I'm so glad I didn't, because I'm in love with Liverpool again. And I didn't know what to do. I couldn't get a job, so I stumbled across Blackburn House on Hope Street, and it had a big sign up saying volunteers wanted women's centre, and something strangely drew me in there, so I went in there and volunteered as the receptionist. And I didn't know quite what I'd stumbled onto, but there was all these amazing Amazonian women that were working there with dungarees on, and they were all dead powerful, and I was like a little naive 21-year-old, like, oh my God, who are these women? And what's so magical about them? I'd never met women like that before. until someone said, well, they're all fabulous lesbians, that's why they're Amazons. And I was like, wow. And they all said they looked at me and knew immediately, even though I didn't, and thought, oh, fresh blood. They'd laugh at me now being part of a lesbian history, an LGBT history thing, because I was always the youngest to do anything. So I feel dead lucky that I fell in love and was privileged to come out in a community of really supportive, amazing people who were free, wild, radical and dead magical. I always think of my life as a story, and they were these amazing characters, larger than life, who just took me in their arms and took me on adventures. I'm also from Bootle, so I'd never seen anything like this or been on adventures like this before. So that part of being part of something and belonging was amazing for me. And I fell in love with the counselling tutor. Don't tell anyone, because it's probably like not very ethical. But, and she worked in Blackburn House, and I wrote this poem. Sorry, Sandra, my gorgeous wife there, but I'll tell you a bit afterwards, which kind of cancels out me reading a love poem. So this is called Bread and Butter. I was minding my own business, reading the love letters of Vita and Virginia, when all worlds collided on the corner of Hope Street. In she swaggered, my own sapphic drama. An old-fashioned girl she was, waistcoat with cigarette roll behind ear. She leaned over the desk and declared, oh God, you know, my eyesight's so bad I can't see anything. Sponge needs custard, cake needs cream, bread needs butter. I loved that. I was her fresh custard, her whipped cream, her rock salt butter melting before her. She was my Victoria sponge, my rich Irish soda bread. We had our complicated cake and ate it. Someone said afterwards, she shaped you, you will never forget her. They were right. I refuse to be sad for the rest of my life. It's just, some days I sense her everywhere. Imagine the hum of her old white Ford as she used to pull up underneath my Fulton Street window. I saw her sitting on the steps of our house on the hill in Fulton Street, caught the smell of her cigarette and her soft, cynical voice, a running commentary on life. The reassuring feel of my face buried in her well-worn jumper. And on those days, I feel like butter must feel without bread. So quite a tragic love story, but for years I thought, oh, you know, she was so amazing and she left me and it was terrible and heartbroken. And I got over it with lots of other terrible relationships. But anyway, I met her last year. I hope nobody knows her. She rang me up after 20 years or so to ask me could she rent a room in my studio. And I wanted to connect again with her, so I was like, yes, you know, thought this might heal the past, you know, and bring closure to everything. She'd become, after being a rough little fabulous lesbian, butch lesbian who like taught me how to swear and be wild, a Buddhist nun. I was teaching a mindfulness course, and it really like woke me up to I'd had this romantic idea of who she was, and I was just like, and then at the end of like these few weeks of me letting her use the room and everything, she told me she didn't know how I ran spirituality workshops because I was really rough and I swore too much, and I was like, I nearly said a swear word in response to that. It just shows you how you can romanticise something, and then when you see the person, you know, years afterwards you think, what the hell was I ever thinking? So that's a lovely story, but it's maybe another time for another poem about that. Anyway, I'm supposed to be talking fast. So these women inspired me to, even though I was a wobbly young woman and didn't have a voice, to set up a social enterprise called Wild Woman, which I have been running for 26 years. I feel very old. People keep coming up to me and going, I knew you 25 years ago running Wild Woman things. And I'm like, and it was an amazing thing to a freeing, magical thing to run in the world. I've struggled with mental health issues all my life, but I want to put something along with that for me that means that I am a sensitive, emotional woman who feels everything deeply and can't cope with the oppression of our current systems and the falsity, and I'm not very good at faking it and not being real. And I think that's my definition of having a mental health problem. And working with thousands of people who I just go, no, you're just real and amazing, and you've got emotions, and you're in a mad world, and you're just feeling it all. I wanted to create spaces in the world where people and their stories were seen, heard and honoured. And during those 26 years, I've sat with 28,000 people while they told their stories, in prisons, schools, governments, universities, hospitals, secure units. We sit together, we share our stories, we make art and try to make sense of the world. 9 years ago, I moved to America to get engaged to an American football player. It seems glamorous and ridiculous now. So I left my life in Liverpool, sold up everything, gave all my contracts up. When I got over there, it seems she was already engaged to 5 other women. That is another long story for another time. But I had to return to the UK broke and had a major breakdown at the terrible thing that I'd been through. I couldn't leave the house. I didn't trust anyone or anything they said. I was too frightened to leave the house. So I began painting life-size self-portraits as a way of reclaiming parts of myself that I'd given away. Not just in that relationship, but over the years. Parts of yourself given away, lost or stolen by other people. So these 10 massive paintings that I did in the house, I call them the 10 mamas, all parts of myself that I wanted back. Soon became 40 women in my living room painting and reclaiming their lost parts too, and getting paint all over my tiny house in Toxteth, which then became 100 women in care homes and prisons all painting their stories, which then became someone from the CCG with 40 grand saying this is amazing, all these women doing amazing things, have this and have an exhibition at Tate Liverpool. We had 7,500 visitors and the charity Big Love Sister was born. We've since collected 3,000 portraits from diverse communities, self-portraits. And I was asked to go to Knowsley and collect 100 self-portraits of women from Knowsley. And maybe women who were struggling, women who were isolated, women who never got to stand here and tell their story. I couldn't seem to find any lesbians in Knowsley or Highland. And I was going around saying, do you know any lesbians in Highland? Where are they? And someone gave me Sandra's number and said maybe she could help. More trouble than they thought. And the rest is history. We got married last in May. And a lovely love story to come out of the heartbreak of the America tragedy. So Sandra was one of the leaders who painted her self-portrait. She's romanticised it because she did come into the room and go, what the hell is this? I can't paint, what are we doing? So we wanted to show you quickly the video of some of the women from Knowsley and their stories.
I am a mother. I am a carer.
I've had mental health problems.
I am unemployed.
I am a chief executive.
I am a survivor of childhood abuse.
I'm in recovery from alcohol.
I am a grandmother.
I am a leader.
I was a victim.
I am a manager.
I am in grief.
I'm a survivor.
I suffer from mental health.
I'm a chief executive.
I suffer with anxiety.
I have been a victim of abuse.
I am a lesbian manager of the youth service.
I have overcome an alcohol addiction.
I have been through domestic violence and abuse.
I'm recovering from a breakdown.
And I'm still here to tell my tale.
Look for the love lives in our lives. Times are hard. It's no
I walked into here a very shy, into myself person, and I feel like I'm just being woken up and coming back, the old Susie. So that's just everything for me. My kids, everyone can see a big difference.
Wish for the sunlight in our skies, though there are clouds. They come and go, the skies are washed with brown.
Coming to these workshops is like coming home.
All over you. You keep down to something to make the heart seem.
There's lots of people at home suffering on their own when they shouldn't be. They should be in groups like this. There should be group therapy, which is what it is. It's doing amazing things for women in the community. Let's help other women in other communities.
Don't give up. We have the sweetest songs that got every song now. Don't give in to any doubts from my yesterdays now.
Some of us have gone through horrendous times in the past. Because I didn't think I'd be on the end of the terrible thing that's happened to me. It never goes. But the thing is, these workshops help us deal with it. And that's a lovely thing, to think that you've got backup. And I think the backup of women helps other women. And that's the whole idea of this group. And it does help other women.
There are thousands of women in our communities who are lost, isolated, depressed, one who's lost a child, one who's stuck in a dead-end job, one who's forgotten what her dreams are. And this project is a really simple way of lifting women from those places and reminding them that their story has another chapter. Whoever you are, however lonely you feel, or lost, or stuck, I want you to know that I am your sister.
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 I am
Your sister.
I'm your sister.
I am 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 your sister.
We are your sisters.
I'm your sister.
Take that out, I presume you will.
I said to Holly yesterday, can we swear? And she was like, sorry. So after we'd done these, the lads started saying, what about us, the girls, get everything, and the women. So did Big Love My Brother. And that was so powerful and equally powerful and amazing and really life-changing for people. What I wanted to say is that our lives are collections of little magical, funny or sad stories that mean more to other people than we'll ever know. And I think these are dark feeling days. Some mornings I wake up and think Voldemort's going to come out of the sky. Things feel so tragic with the current situation and climate. But the fight goes on, and it breaks my heart. One of the things that breaks my heart at the moment is the fight between the trans community and some of the lesbian women's community that radicalised me and freed me. So I just really wanted to say that having amazing trans women and trans men in our groups makes them richer and teaches me how to be a woman, and that they're always welcome in our groups, and that we stand by our trans community. But we've all got these amazing stories to tell, and we might not have a voice or a way of telling them, but we all do have them, and there's so many threads that connect us all when we be real and share our story. We've all got the ability to create, even if we're frightened. I remember the head of the Tate saying, I can't come, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I was like, no, you come in and put a mark on the page. We have the ability to share, to create things in the world. We've just come back from the Orkney Isles, where we were taken into this ancient tomb that was created and shown all these markings on the wall. And everyone's like, wow, they're so amazing. And I was like, well, they are, but so's what you can create and what I can draw. And there's also Viking markings on the wall, and everyone's like, wow, what do those Viking wisdoms say? And it says, I was here. And Vlad came and robbed something, and he is great. He has a big head and all this kind of stuff. So it's just about honouring people's stories and honouring people's creativity now, and saying that's as amazing as those ancient markings are. I'm not a fan of making people into role models. I'm sorry, I'm probably going against everything people are doing. Putting people on stages so I don't even really know why I'm here. And all these Women in Business Award, Woman of the Year and all that. I think give the money to women in the community to have a big party, and stop putting the same people on stage to say the same things over and over. And to use your leverage, so if you get up on stage or you're invited to something, ask someone who's not invited. Share the stage with someone amazing that you think their voice should be heard. But we wanted to invite you to share a little bit of something of yourself. It said question and answer, and I said to Holly, what? I mean, I can't stand them question and answer things, sorry. And what would you ask me anyway? I did one once for the probation service, and people were asking all intellectual questions to the panel, and then someone said, where did you get your earrings and then boots from? That's the only question they asked me. So we thought we'd do something juicy, and maybe it's about a bit out your comfort zone, but there you go. So we're going to ask you with that pen and paper to do a little silly sketch of yourself. It can be just a line or a little stick person, it doesn't have to be great. A little self-portrait of yourself, even if you're scared to draw it. And to put in it 3 symbols that say something about your story. It could be a cat or a bar of chocolate, or 3 symbols that say something about you. Sandra's done one, she rolled her eyes before she did it. Because even though she's been on all the programmes, she's still scared of big. Claire, yours. Claire,
can I ask a question? Is it okay if people do it as we're going along, because they're a bit over time? Is that all right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or maybe they can share them at the end.
That would be lovely.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So as you're sitting there, you can sketch.
Thank you. Thanks so much. That would be wonderful.
Can we welcome Christine, I don't know how that's working, because Christine and Owen, sorry guys.
Before we do that, can we just thank our last 2 speakers? Right, I'm sorry to have to prevent you from drawing, but please do doodle it as you're going along and listen to kind of the speakers that we have coming up next. I'm really delighted that Christian Owens has found the time to be with us today. Christian is just a tour de force really, and he speaks authentically from the heart about his journey, about his job, about his identity. He has his own speaking business now, a successful 25-year career in the police, and is still serving as a very busy detective sergeant. So please welcome him. He's going to talk to us today about his just his life, I think, and his journey. So Christian, thank you.
I don't know whether do I need that or I'm mic'd up anyway. Just conscious of it, like Sanji, you can't see behind me yet. Come on. Yeah. Okay, can everybody hear okay? Back as well, yeah? Okay, today we're celebrating LGBT plus History Month. A month dedicated to celebrate LGBT history, raise awareness and educate about the discrimination that we experience. And I want to thank Holly and everyone at LJMU for inviting me to speak. I want to share with you my journey of survival, celebration and transformation, both inside and outside of my workplace. Before I go into that in a little bit more detail, there was just a short video clip, if I can get it to play. And it's a short video, it's only about 3 minutes long, but for me it demonstrates the need to work in partnership with other people and with other agencies. And this was a video that we did in conjunction with Mermaids and also Danny Kilbride from Thinking Film. And it was about mental health. And I suppose it was about me being able to talk about my struggle with mental health because of my identity, but also in a positive way, so that I could show the young people at Mermaids that actually it can be dark at times, but there's always positivity and there's always light, and you can really achieve anything you want to. So it just gives you, it's just a short video, it kind of encompasses my journey, but I like to think it's positive as well, and I think it's really important to talk about mental health, so that's key as well. Thank you very much. As a young child, from the age of about 5 or 6, I knew that I was trans. Obviously back then I didn't know what it was, I didn't know what trans was. But I knew that I was a boy, and I knew that I had to spend the rest of my life as a boy and as a man. So that was a really positive start to my life. But then, as many trans people experience once I got to puberty, my world kind of came crashing down a little bit. And that's where I really struggled, I suppose, going through secondary school, really struggled with my mental health. I joined the police at 23, and again I always knew about my gender identity, but was too scared to do anything about it because I knew it was going to be a massive journey to take on. And I think as well, if I'm really honest, I wasn't sure how well Merseyside police would deal with it. I didn't see any other trans people around me, and you know, I just decided to kind of leave it where it was and struggle through life really and conform in the best way that I could, and that's what I did. That's what I did for a long time. So I kind of hid away for a couple more years, and it wasn't until December 2012 I started my medical and surgical and legal transition. So it was actually the 10th of December 2012, and I first stepped foot through the doors of headquarters, Merseyside Police, as Christian Owens. And it was the scariest day of my life. I actually got the train from home to Lime Street, and I never actually thought I would make it through the city centre to the front doors of where I was going to be working. And yeah, it just got gradually easier and easier for me. There were really difficult times and dark times, and walking through the city, you know, and going to the train stations, you know, people would shout at things at me, they would stare at me, and I've been talked about on trains, you know, where people obviously thought I wasn't hearing what they were saying. But as I progressed with hormone treatment and surgery and was able to feel and identify a little bit more as a man and more comfortable, it got better and easier for me. And I suppose that's why I do what I do now. That's why I'm as visible as I am, particularly within the organisation, because I was the first serving police officer to transition. It was a difficult journey, but I like to think that now it's made it easier for people that are going to follow on from me. It's so much more powerful when somebody can stand up and say, I understand what you're going through, because I've been through that, you know, so I've suffered that hate crime. You know, I've suffered those experiences with my family. So to be able to stand up and say, you know, I want to make this city safe for you to walk through the streets at night, because that's what I want for myself as well. You know, so that is so powerful. And that is why I'm visible today, and that's why I do what I do. Merseyside Police are doing everything they possibly can to make the organisation inclusive and in order to kind of value difference as much as they can. And hopefully it'll encourage more trans people to want to work with us and engage with us. So it is a really positive time at the moment in Merseyside Police with you know, valuing difference and specifically with trans inclusion. The American poet E. Cummings said, it takes courage to grow up and become who you really are. To live your life as the real you is so important. It's probably taken for granted by many, but as a trans person it's something that we fight and struggle for every day of our lives. Let's stand together, be visible as our true selves, and celebrate our achievements and successes. But let's remember those who can't be visible and strive to raise awareness, educate and increase trans inclusion. It's time to celebrate the courage that it takes to live openly as a trans person, whilst also raising awareness about the discrimination that we still face every day worldwide. The experience of being out, visible and welcomed for who we are is life-changing. And it's something that we should all experience. We deserve that freedom of expression, so being the true you should be celebrated today. I'm a man, I'm a trans man, and I'm a gay man. A quote that my twin sister sent to me after my gender reassignment surgery sums up how I feel right now. The wounds have changed me. I am so soft with scars. My skin breathes and beats stars. The scars that I bear show what I've had to do to survive. They demonstrate complete and utter happiness with who I am right now. There will be other survivors out there who might just need a glimmer of hope and light, and that's why I'm stood here speaking out, changing culture and raising awareness. My family's culture and beliefs affected my decision making as a child and as a young person, and police culture has affected my decisions as an adult throughout my career. I want to give you all an insight into my journey, for you to step into my shoes for 20 minutes, to feel what it's like being trans, a police officer, the ups, the downs and the highs and lows. It will be like a roller coaster ride, and you might want to get off, but you can't, because I couldn't. So enjoy it and let it become your life for a short time. My upbringing was in a practicing Catholic family in Runcorn in the 70s and 80s. I was the youngest of 4 with 3 older sisters, and during my early childhood I felt like a boy. I looked like a boy and I was happy with how I felt. I didn't have a penis, but I just did what kids do, and I simplified that in my head. I made a penis out of something at home and I used that to pee standing up, just like any other little boy. That helped me to feel okay. I didn't know what trans was. I knew that I was different. I didn't fully understand. I just knew that I wasn't female. And when puberty hit, that's when my world fell apart. I didn't want it, and I didn't want the changes that were happening to my body. I was lonely and isolated, and I would describe myself as a misfit. I didn't fit with boys or girls, And the only thing that kept me going was the company and companionship provided by being a twin. By 17, I identified as gay. I was brought up in a practicing Catholic family and attended Catholic schools. I vividly remember my dad struggling with my sexuality. And one evening, the Wogan show was on TV and Sir Ian McKellen had come out as gay. I so wanted to hear another gay person, but my dad switched the TV off. I switched it on and he switched it off, and this went on for some time. Being gay wasn't accepted by my dad. He told me that homosexuality wasn't allowed under his roof. His beliefs didn't allow that, and we fought over it. Yet when I ventured out to a gay youth group in Back Colquitt Street in Liverpool, aged 17, and still at school, I missed my last train home to Runcorn, he collected me. He didn't ask any questions, he didn't shout at me. What did that mean? Was he quietly accepting me, or was he just glad to see that his child was safe? I joined the police in 1994. I was a 23-year-old woman, a gay woman. I wasn't accepted on the section. I was told that it had got out that I was gay, and I started to pretend. I took a male friend to a Christmas party as my partner to convince them that I was heterosexual and that they were wrong. These cultures, my family, the police family, they made me think, what about being trans? That hadn't gone away, but that was too difficult to take on right at that moment. So this led to my hidden life, my lack of identity, the feeling of being lost. There was definitely no structure for starting my journey, for becoming me. In 2009, I had to accept that I needed to do something. I had to stop being hidden. Someone said recently in a documentary about trans people, that's the character that I created, not the real me. And that's how I got by. That had to change. I was in a state of confusion and didn't know where to go. I was becoming increasingly uncomfortable with my body, with my female parts, and my lack of penis. I started to explore my gender identity, started to bind my breasts and wear a prosthetic penis. I did this behind closed doors, and only when I was brave enough did I venture outside into public view. I felt scared, but elated at the same time, almost high. In work I confided in one person, and together we explored what support there was for me. In our organisation at that time, we weren't equipped to deal with me or my transition. We had no policy, insufficient training, and a lack of understanding and acceptance. This led me to withdraw and hide. At that time, my feelings of being a man couldn't be hidden. Started to lead a double life. In work, I was a woman, and behind closed doors, I was a man. It was becoming unbearable. I spoke to my twin about it, the closest person to me, but it was just too difficult for her to understand and accept, which I totally understand now, but I didn't then. My partner at that time also walked away for similar reasons. I felt very alone. I was forced to take action when I reached my breaking point. I was becoming so withdrawn, only wanting to be behind closed doors, so I could be Christian. And as a busy detective sergeant in investigations, I was struggling to commit to long, busy shifts. I just couldn't concentrate. So I approached HR and the Equality and Diversity team, and we started to do something about it. We had no knowledge. Nobody had done this before in our force. We were starting from scratch. We started researching what other forces had done. We looked at policies and we started to write our own. we started to make plans for me becoming Christian. It wasn't easy for anybody. It was a steep learning curve for all, but it was the biggest and the best decision that I've ever made. I finally started my life as Christian in 2012. My hormone treatment started on the 12th of October 2012. My name and ID was changed on the 29th of November 2012, and my first steps through Merseyside Police Headquarters was on the 10th of December 2012. A very scary day indeed. During that time I lost contact with my twin sister, who found it so difficult to understand and accept. She has since told me that she had to grieve for her loss, and with reflection and hindsight, I truly understand how difficult this must have been for her. The first year was so painful. I was stared at, pointed at. On my train to and from work, people would talk about me. Before I even got to work, I was anxious and stressed, yet had to continue with the everyday stresses and strains of being a detective sergeant. I got used to scanning rooms to check who was in there, trying to prepare for what might happen. I avoided using the toilets at work when I was in there. People would often refuse to use the toilets at the same time as me. This led me to restricting my fluid intake whilst I was at work, so I didn't need to use the toilet. I stopped using the canteen at headquarters because I was too scared to confront people and worried about what they may say. I often went up and down in the lift, too afraid to get out. But as I progressed, things got a little easier for me. I did face prejudice from colleagues, inappropriate behaviour and comments. People didn't challenge when they should have done. But what got me through this difficult time were my allies. We should never underestimate our allies, and that is why having an LGBT plus allies programme is so important. When colleagues pointed at me and said, "Is that a man or a woman?" my allies stood up and protected me. And when people said, "Is that Christian or is it Christine?" my allies stepped in and stopped this behaviour and speculation. As my transition continued, I faced my own struggles behind closed doors. As I was finally becoming a man, the man that I was born to be, I was struggling with the slow pace and the rigorous psychiatric care pathway as it then was. Some parts of my body felt right and others caused me great despair. My innermost fears were keeping me awake at night. The thought of somebody finding me, seeing my body as it was. That was at the forefront of my mind because I was thinking at times that I couldn't go on, that I couldn't face the struggle. Ironically, what kept me going, what kept me alive, was the fact that I couldn't bear the thought of dying in that body and somebody finding me. Somebody said in a TV documentary called Transformation Street, "I'm not going to the grave looking like this." And that's exactly how I felt. I couldn't bear anybody to see my body. Before surgery, I'd never looked at myself naked for many years. I bound my breasts and never removed my clothing from the waist down unless to shower. As I progressed with transition, things got a little easier with time. Have I been treated differently because I'm trans? Yes. Is that as a result of ignorance and a lack of knowledge, or is it as a result of discrimination? The stigma that is attached to your identity, the speculation that often surrounds you, that sometimes you hear about and sometimes you don't. It's probably all of those things. And we will only eradicate that and stop it from happening by talking and through awareness and enlightenment, which is why I'm here speaking today. In 2014, I had the first of my surgeries, my chest reconstruction a double mastectomy. In January 2017, I had the first of 4 stages of lower surgery, phalloplasty. And on the 16th of September last year, I had my final stage of surgery. I now have the penis that I was born without and that I've waited all of my life for, 48 years. Someone asked me recently how I felt after my last stage of surgery, and the truth is, I woke up after surgery and I felt no pain, or distress, or anxiety. I just felt at peace. I was complete. I had arrived. For me, surgery has given me the ability to function as who I am, me. My body and mind are totally in tune. I walk around naked now and I love what I see, something I haven't experienced for most of my life. I have a life now, not just an existence. Transition and surgery has been a totally freeing experience. Since completing my 10-year journey of transformation, I feel like I can really start living my life fully, enjoying it, including some of the things that I've sacrificed for many years. One that springs to mind is dating, something that most people take for granted, but can be so difficult and complicated for trans people because of judgment and prejudice and the fear of disclosure when and how we should do it. What triggers hate crime against a trans person? Is it the way we look? How our voice sounds? How we dress? Is it our body? The bodies that we struggle with for almost all of our lives? And what we seek to transform just to feel like ourselves? I can empathise with that because it's the fear that I felt and still feel. The feeling of what someone would think or even do if they discovered my body before surgery. Even now, after fully transitioning and having the body that I just wanted to be born with, I fear discrimination if someone was to find out how I started out in life. So that always leaves me with a decision to make about disclosure, especially in intimate situations with people. When do I disclose? And how much do I disclose? It leaves my family with fear each time I leave the house, especially if I'm going on a date or meeting new people for the first time. The fear that someone will attack, injure, or even kill me for being trans. That feeling of living in fear for just being you, the way that you were born and the identity that you were so proud of. But that won't stop me from getting excited about the next chapter of my life. In some ways, I feel like a teenage boy who is about to discover dating, relationships and sex for the first time. And I'm not going to lie, this is something that I am extremely excited about, especially as I have a very precious body part that I have waited so long for. Only yesterday, I had an appointment with my surgeon in London so that he could review his handiwork. And he asked me if I'd had sex yet, and I knew that question was coming. He followed up by saying, "I think you will need a very accommodating partner." A question that someone asked me just before I completed my final stage of lower surgery. So when you complete your surgery, will you have a fully functioning penis? My response to them was, do you really think that I would have put myself through all of this for something that didn't work? Being trans can be lonely and isolated. You often think, where are all the other trans people? Which is why I need to be as visible as possible. Young people and the parents of children need people like me to be visible, to speak out about the ups and downs, the highs and lows, but about the journey. It makes me proud to be an ambassador, a coach, a mentor to those people who need me. Young people, parents, youth services and other organisations and businesses. I've helped to guide and mentor young people at local youth groups, colleagues who are experiencing the transition of a child or family member, and organisations who are trying to educate and raise awareness of their staff and put relevant policies in place. And this is work that I will continue to do long after I leave the police service, as I've now created Gender Space, a public speaking business which enables me to use my own personal journey of discovery to enlighten and inspire others. It is a privilege to use my lived experience as a trans man to help audiences understand, empathise and gain a greater understanding of gender identity. I've survived this journey with the help of wonderful colleagues, friends and family who have stood by me, had my back and challenged discrimination and ignorance, and it is my responsibility to now do that for others. Where am I today? I'm absolutely flying. I've completed my 10-year journey and had my final stage of surgery last year. I've escaped the cage that once imprisoned me, and my transformation has saved me. Each night before I go to sleep and every morning when I wake, I look at the lyrics of a Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds song hanging on my wall. They remind me of the journey that I've undergone and the blessed place where I am now. Those words are, I'm transforming, I'm vibrating, I'm glowing, I'm flying, look at me now, I'm flying, look at me now. I'm grateful that I've survived this journey, and my passion is now to be visible and help others, to guide them through their journey so that they too will reach this amazing place that I've reached. It's my responsibility to raise awareness and increase knowledge, which will hopefully reduce stigma and discrimination. And it makes me so very proud to have turned my journey into an opportunity of enlightenment. Being me is all that I ever wanted to achieve and experience. It's just been a little bit more difficult for me than most, but you must never give up the dream of being your true self. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you so much, that was beautiful. We've got about 10 minutes, so what we're going to do is ask audience questions to both Christian and also to Sandra and to Claire. So I don't know if you want to come and stand at the front and we'll send the roving mic around for anybody in the audience that has questions. And also hopefully you've been drawing as well, so we want to see those drawings.
Carry on. Just having a big love in it.
So have we got any questions for our speakers? Come on, don't be shy.
I'll just say you look much younger than 48.
Exactly, yeah.
I just wanted to say you look much younger than 48, did you say?
48, yeah.
48.
What's your secret?
I think that's the question, what's your secret?
Being trans.
Well, thank you for your honesty. Yeah, it was an honour listening to you. Thank you so much. What a journey, yeah. And good luck as well with the future one, yeah.
The sex.
Right, study on it, Friday.
Questions? Billie Jean.
Thank you all for your speech, your talks this afternoon. It's brilliant. I was just wondering, with Big Love Sister, is there any more events planned, or do you do workshops regularly? Or tell me more about that.
So since Sandra's diagnosis, we've been wobbled. Our world's been a bit wobbled. So we've had like a year out of just thinking, what the hell? How do we deal with this? But we've just got a new little studio in the Blue Coat. So if you walk through the garden and shout Claire, I'll wave at Rapunzel. Everyone's welcome to visit. And you know, the funding situation around the arts is dire. So we are struggling a lot with stuff. And where we used to be able to go in and work with 100 people and do these amazing projects, the money's just not there anymore. But we have just got a little tiny pot to do some work in Sefton, to go back to our... Went all around the world to find a woman, and then she was in Bootle. So we have just got a little bit of funding to do some work in Sefton around stories. And we do loads of gorgeous stuff out the Blue Coat, so get in touch and look at our little website and join in. The thing we really want to do is, with our Big Love Sister, Big Love My Brother, we really want to do Big Love Trans, because I think that would be amazing to have 100 self-portraits, and for people to be able to tell their story through that. We know some amazing young people that you probably inspired that really want to do that as well, so if anyone can help us think about how we could do that, I think that would be a beautiful project to allow people a safe way to tell their stories through art.
Yes, with your hand up.
It's just funny.
Do you have anything for? Oh, first of all, I'll say thank you very much for your speeches today. It's been amazing. But do you have anything for schools that are the same gender schools, all girls school or boys school? My daughter went to an all girls school, and she's 18 now, and she's not lesbian at all or anything like that. I am. So when I put her in primary school, obviously it was 16 years ago, it's not something that was discussed, so I met it firsthand. Teachers accusing me of being attracted to my daughter and things like that. So it's just what's available in schools, because at the time that my daughter went to school, one of her friends came out as a lesbian, and they were trying to have a relationship in the school, and they weren't allowed to hold hands in the school. So the whole school got together and all the girls held each other's hands, and that's obviously girl power, and that was fantastic. And also in the final year of my daughter being in the school, one of her friends changed and became a he, but the school just didn't want to accept that he was becoming a he, and then it was judged on whether he could be in that school anymore, which obviously shouldn't be right, because he's coming to the end of his GCSEs, he should be staying in that school, he should be doing everything as it is. So it's just, do you have anything available in that sort of area?
It's more familiar. Yeah, I mean, obviously in my kind of day job as a police officer, I work with community engagement, so it means that I do go into schools myself to give, you know, this type of awareness and education. But there's obviously only so much that I can do. But there are lots of other kind of organisations and agencies out there, charities that are doing some fantastic work as well. So I also volunteer with diversity role models. So in my kind of spare time, I'll go into schools and we go in kind of talking about transphobic, biphobic, homophobic bullying that goes on in schools. So there is a lot of stuff going on.
Just policy changing. Can we not change policy? Yeah. Because policy changing in respect of bullying in schools hasn't changed.
It's still not changing. Yeah. So obviously adding on these things are additional bullying things that are happening in schools that are just putting vulnerable people, the next generation, that are obviously going to mould our society.
Yeah, totally.
Sorry, I think one of the issues with schools is that homophobia, like racism, is totally institutionalised. I mean, I was in a school 15 years after Section 28 was repealed, and a teacher turned around to me and said, "Oh no, you can't advertise your gay youth club in here, it's promoting homosexuality." That law went out 15 years ago, so I think it's like a few-pronged attack. I think it's us as role models. It's having services and activities that young people can refer to, but it's trying to change that culture of that system that is so stuck in its ways, and I think that's everyone's job. I think it's about leadership in the schools, I think it's about government policies and laws, but I think it's also about the pupils themselves, the parents, and everyone in that community connecting and going, hang on a minute, this just is 2020, are you having a laugh? You know, because I think they are far behind. We've got loads of things we can do in schools, but the political situation is such that what schools want to buy is a GCSE in maths. They don't want to buy personal development. They don't want to buy enhancing pupils' voice. They want to buy, and really, you know, in a way, they're tied as well. So I think it's all sorts of things. I mean, I think the stuff getting, you know, how does the education system and research in this university influence secondary schools, and you know, and how do institutions change?
And how can they leverage people like us to go in and back up with the research that it's important. We work loads with doing Big Love Little Sister and Big Love My Brother in schools, and everyone's going, young people are in crisis and young people are so disturbed with mental health problems, and I would say our systems are fucked and our young people are spirited and fabulous and wild, and we need, you know, it's so great when you can get in the back door and do the work with them. Because they give me loads of hope. You know, they tell me about what the right language is to use, and we're all right with that, miss, and what about this. So they give me loads of hope, and I think it is a systematic change that needs to happen. I'm sorry you experienced that, and you know, blood on your daughter, probably such an amazing woman.
Oh, she's fantastic, my daughter. She's brilliant.
They are amazing.
But, yeah.
Thank you.
A lot of work to do.
Oh,
yeah, absolutely. We're going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid. Thank you so much again for you might be able to caption at the end if you've got any further questions for them. And I'm going to attempt to move this on without breaking it. And Gender Space, by the way, is Christian's company. Is that the right way to put it, Christian?
Yes.
Yeah. So by all means, send him an email with inquiries about speaking engagements and so on. So our next part, I'm really proud of the network that we've set up. So we set up a new research network called LJMUQ. And it's a network for researchers that may be LGBTQ or maybe doing research that has LGBTQ kind of themes and content. And we're really lucky today that we've got two of our shiniest researchers with us. We have Matt Hibbert, who is a PhD in public health, and Billie Gina Thomason, who is my PhD student. He's very close to submission, and I'm very proud of her. Let me give you a bit of an introduction into their research. So Billie Gina's work focuses on gender identity in 19th century Britain, specifically on gender as a performance and a malleable identity. She looks at what she calls gender passing in 19th century Britain and the lives of 25 working class female to male gender passing individuals. So biological women who identified as men in all aspects of their lives, including employment, relationships, and how they presented themselves. So it's a very important contribution to our understandings, really, of gender. I'm very proud of her. And a Mars there as well. 2 Mars today. And then Matthew Hibbert, again, an absolutely wonderful example of somebody who is making huge inroads into research on health and LGBTQ lives. So Matthew's PhD research is investigating sexualised drug use amongst LGBT people, and that's divided into 2 research projects. An online quantitative questionnaire and qualitative interviews, and it's hoped that this research will help to explain why people engage in certain sexualised drug use, how it impacts on physical and mental well-being, and whether the public health issue is observed at all in LGBTQ people, and mostly in men who have sex with other men. So what we'll do is have 15 minutes of presentation from both of them, and then I'll take questions for both if that's okay. So Billie, can I invite you to the floor? Thank you.
So hello, yes, good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me along today and being able to speak to you all as well. Emma's sort of already introduced, I suppose, what I do, but you know, just pretend you didn't hear that. Now you do. So this paper is going to introduce you to three people who lived in the 19th century as a gender contrary to their biology. So, as previously mentioned, my PhD explores the lives of 25 working class, female to male, gender passing individuals who lived in the 19th century, and I've created microbiographies about each of their lives. So gender passing is a concept that I've developed and explores the historic lives of individuals whose gender identity was contrary to their biological identity. These individuals were recognised as men in all aspects of their life, including their social status in the community, the types of employment they were engaged in, the positions as husbands, fathers and as breadwinners as well. However, it was largely due to unforeseen circumstances such as death, accidental discovery or non-related criminal convictions that these individuals were actually exposed as being biologically female. So although I refer to historic gender non-conforming people as gender-passing individuals, as we go through this paper you might see the term the female husband or female husband. And this term was developed by Henry Fielding in 1746 when he published a fictional pamphlet based on Charles Hamilton. Now Hamilton is considered one of the earliest examples of historic gender non-conformity in Britain. He engaged in typically masculine employment, physically looked male, engaged in several romantic relationships with women and was also known as a bit of a Lothario around town. The cartoon that you can see on screen there was created, we think, by George Cruikshank, who was one of the most famous 19th century cartoonists. The image shows the public whipping of Hamilton after he was exposed and brings Fielding's pamphlet into a visual form. Note how Hamilton is obviously central to the cartoon with cropped hair, wearing trousers as if to highlight their masculinity, but ultimately is exposed as female by them being topless. Now, I've largely steered away from the term female husband because of the social connotations and binary roles linked to being female and husband within the 19th century. However, the term remains popular throughout the 19th century to refer to gender non-conforming people. So the first individual that I want to introduce you to is James Allen. Now, James Allen met his wife Abigail Naylor in Camberwell Terrace, where they worked as a groom and housemaid respectively. James was one of the most attentive and valued grooms. However, due to his relationship with Abigail, it resulted in him having to move to a new place of work. And after a period of separation, James wrote to Abigail and asked her to marry him. And the couple married on the 13th of December 1807 in St Giles Church in Camberwell, London. And obviously you can see a copy of their marriage certificate on screen there. On the 13th of January 1829, however, James was hit on the head by a piece of fallen timber in a dockyard where he worked. After his accident, James was taken to St Thomas's Hospital, where he was pronounced dead. His wife was called and informed that not only was her husband dead, he was also a woman, something which she categorically denied knowledge of. 3 weeks after his death, a 40-page pamphlet was published that claimed to tell the, quote, true narrative of James's life. It explored Abigail's heritage, James's earlier work, the couple's marriage, and highlighted how James had abandoned Abigail several times throughout the relationship. The pamphlet also went into detail about the physicality and condition of James's body, noting how he was perfectly female in every way. And the pamphlet wrote, the first view of the body excited very general admiration as to the symmetrical proportions of the entire subject. As fine a formed woman was presented to their eyes as ever was looked upon. The skin, having been swathed in bandages and other thick coverings, was of the purest white, intersected with veins of fine blue. Now, James is the only gender-passing individual who I've actually been lucky enough to access an image of. And in the pamphlet that was published after his death, there were 2 black and white portraits that were printed of the couple. And underneath each portrait there's a subtitle, and Abigail's reads, wife to the pretended James Allen, she resided with her associate for more than 21 years, ignorant of her real sex. And what is more astonishing, kept the secret of her injuries inviolable to the last, proving incontestably that a woman can actually keep a secret. And James's subtitle reads as a portrait of the female husband who, under the assumed name James Allen, was married for 21 years without once disclosing her sex. She resided and earned her living as a sawyer at Redriff, where she was killed January the 13th, 1829. And a colour version of this portrait was also published and could be purchased for 3 shillings, according to local advertisements at the time. Now, in the same month, a painter, Thomas Howell Jones, who I've only actually recently just located this painting, so that was quite exciting, created an engraving of the pair, and obviously that's on screen at the moment. The engraving differs to the portrait as it offers sort of a little bit further insight into the couple's life. For instance, there is a nod to James's employment as a sawyer, with tools hanging behind him, and there's also an allusion to Abigail's housewife status as well, through the washing behind her. However, it's the image of James that I find most interesting, as we see the muscularity of James's body under the clothing, likely to have been body stuffing, padding and binding, according to press reports, to offer a more manly and masculine silhouette. So, apologies that might be quite small. This year's LGBT History Month theme is prose, poetry and plays, and obviously we've heard some lovely poetry earlier this afternoon, and I just want to take a little minute to focus on that within the 19th century. So at least 2 street ballads were published that discussed gender passing in the 19th century, and they both seem to focus on James's story. I'll read not all of it, but some of this ballad, and just see if you can make any of the links that I've just talked about. Begins, if you want to hear a bit of fun, oh listen unto me, about a female husband, the life you never see. Such a singular thing you never knew, no not in all your life, as 2 females to be wed and live as man and wife. The female husband lived in service as a groom, 'twas there she got wed to the housemaid in her bloom. Time passed for many years, a virgin she was still, but her husband would for jealousy oft use her very ill. But then she turned herself in bed, dear Jemmy, she would say, we have been married for many years, remember this, I pray. But what a disappointment now when she thought of that, why what she never got, it could not make her fat. Sometimes he was a publican and dwelt in Baldock town, with good ale and beer his customers he did supply around. Then to the docks he went to work, as we had often heard, where the men would often joke about his whiskers and his beard. Sometimes he was a sawyer, done his duty like a man, 'twas there his days were ended, as you shall understand. Now for 20 years they lived, as man and wife so clever, both eat and drink and slept, and just these things together. So I advise young women all to look before you wed, for if you should be so deceived, you'll rue your marriage bed. Now, it's interesting that the author of this street ballad encourages this sort of promiscuity amongst women, encouraging them to take control of who they are marrying and confirm their partner's biological identity before they commit to them. And similarly, the fact that James had 2 ballads published about him, a pamphlet, and over 100 articles attributed to him suggests that he was well known in the 19th century and potentially, obviously, someone to remember. Now on screen here is an image of where James was finally sort of buried, which was in the private vault at St John's, in Horsley down in Surrey. The pamphlet commented that the private burial was specifically for James's protection and to deter from body snatchers. And it's interesting then in this sense that the community and authorities actually put procedures in place to protect James's body and allow him to be buried privately as well. So the second person that I'll look at is Harry Stokes, who was born in Doncaster around 1799 as Harriet Stokes. After a difficult childhood, Harriet took her brother's clothing and fled the family home. From here, Harriet became known as Harry Stokes, and it is this name that they adopted until their death, until 60 years later. Little is known about how Harry met his first wife, Anne Hance, but they were married in the old parish of Sheffield, now the cathedral, on the 14th of January 1817, and they remained married for over 20 years. Again, so it's an image there that can be seen on screen. Now Harry moved to Manchester around 1820 and first appeared in the trade directory as a bricksetter in Potter Street, and he also held positions as a special constable and a beer retailer, and lived in various addresses in the Spinning Fields area as well. Now 1838 marked a notable change to Harry's life because he was exposed as being female by his wife, of all people, after their 21-year marriage, and approached the deputy constable in Manchester, Mr. Joseph Sadler Thomas, and exposed her husband's identity, claiming that he had been mistreating her and that he was an alcoholic and had withheld the housekeeping. Interestingly, this is not the first type of case that Mr. Thomas has actually encountered, because he was also the sort of lead deputy, the lead investigator to James Allen's case as well. So Harry was described as a master bricklayer, and his design aesthetic was noticeable in his community. He was one of the lads and engaged and socialised with his work colleagues. He created and moulded his masculinity to fully engage in masculine gender roles at the time, with reporters from John Bull stating, "No one except perchance from her beardless cheeks and a certain shrillness of voice could for a moment suspect that the little broad-set bricklayer was of the softer sex." As previously mentioned, Harry was not only a master bricklayer but also a special constable as well in the 11th and 13th district in Manchester, and coverage from The Guardian recognised how Harry was an attentive special. He was punctual, enthusiastic and willing in his position as well. Now, annually the specials would be sworn in at the New Bailey to volunteer their services, and they were responsible largely for police and trade union meetings, elections and orange processions. And Harry was described by the Observer as being of good exterior with a prepossessing appearance and manners and features rather handsome. He was considered remarkable in his work ethic and was a respected member of the community. Now, it's possible that due to Harry being a reliable special, his good character may have enabled him to have protection from the law, although he did move several times in a brief period, perhaps suggesting that he was never fully settled and felt safe in that one community. So it was commented upon in the newspapers that Harry had been struggling with financial concerns in the periods leading up to his death. On the night of his death, Harry had been out drinking in Pendlebury, and on his return home it was thought that he'd fell into the River Irwell, with authorities concluding that he'd committed suicide. On screen, this is an actual copy of his death certificate that I was able to get, and it's clear that although Harry identified as a man, he was registered as Harriet Stokes, and his sex was also as female there. Noted under Harry's rank or profession, however, it reads, "Bricksetter having assumed and wore man's attire for 20 years and upwards." Despite authorities labelling Harry as female, newspapers seemingly were supportive of his gender identity, and the Liverpool Mercury noted that from this point we must drop the feminine appellative and speak of Harry Stokes as a boy who has worked his way to the dignity of a journeyman bricksetter. Despite this revelation, they still referred to Harry using a mixture of male and female pronouns throughout their article. And so the final individual I'll share with you all is William Seymour. Now, we know a little bit more about William's early life compared to others, and the journey that he took to becoming a man. In 1850, a girl named Mary was born in Taunton in Somerset. She was described as being quite tomboyish in character and lived on a farm, immersing herself in agricultural life. At 14 years old, Mary married an army surgeon named Honeywell. Their marriage was seemingly difficult, and in 1866 Mary escaped from her husband, who was abusive, and moved to London, and it was here that Mary assumed the identity of William. Now, William met with a family friend in London who introduced him to the career of cab driving, a position that they remained in for at least 9 years. Newspapers, including the Liverpool Mercury, the Liverpool Albion, noted that William moved to Liverpool around 1869, and by this time he had a wife named Agnes, and who was 7 years his senior. Both William and Agnes were known locally in Liverpool and frequented around Pembroke Place and Mount Pleasant as well. And in 1871, obviously on screen there, not very clear, but William and Agnes lived in Back Ashton Street, which is now part of the University of Liverpool. In February 1875, however, he was charged with stealing 20 pounds of beef and 5 pounds of veal from a butcher on Lee Street, just opposite the bombed out church. And on his arrest, the police noted that they'd found, quote, traces of suet on his clothes, and thus confirmed that he was indeed the thief. Now, using the quarter sessions and calendar of prisoners at Liverpool Central Library, William was catalogued as 48 of 51 to be sentenced that day. And in addition to William's name being on the calendar, there was a handwritten note saying Seymour, William, otherwise Mary Seymour, otherwise Mary Honeywell, which is just at the top image there. Clearly, this referred to William's alias identities, including his married name as a female and a female version of his presented self. Likewise, there was another note, which was seen at the bottom in red, that was on the actual quarter sessions book, which read, Being asked in what name she would be tried, she replied MH. Obviously this referred to William's married name as Mary Honeywell with the initials. Perhaps William's motivation to be tried as female came from a wish to be treated more leniently, but this was not to be the case. And in an article published in the Liverpool Mercury, the recorder Mr. J.B. Aspinall said, "How do you account for the way in which you're going about in male clothing and as a car driver? What is the meaning of it? Of course it is not an offence, but one wishes to know something about you." Now, the recognition of William Seymour's identity being described as not an offence implied that there was a possible leniency to gender passing, and William may not have been the first in a Liverpool court, but the only one I've found. Nonetheless, William was sentenced under the name Mary Honeywell and served 2 months hard labour in Walton Jail, and it is from here that William seemed to disappear from history. So what do the stories tell us? I think the most obvious thing that these stories tell us is that gender non-conforming people have lived throughout history, and that identifying as a gender contrary to their biology is not a new concept. The 19th century press seemingly celebrated an individual's ability to identify as and perform as a man. Journalists recognised how individuals were successful breadwinners. They were husbands, fathers, stepfathers, they were providers and supported their families. They were good examples of working class men. Largely, individuals lived their lives quiet enough to remain unknown, but bold enough to challenge contemporary gender ideals at the time. Many were exposed only after their death, meaning that newspapers and pamphlets created narratives about them, and this has resulted in me not having material from the individuals themselves. There's also difficulty in fully tracing the lives of individuals due to name changes and biological names being lost as well. So this raises the question of just how many other gender-passing individuals have been lost in history and how many more remained unknown throughout their lives as well. Thank you. So this is Matt now.
Hi everyone. You may notice there's a content warning on the bottom of my first slide. That's not because I'm going to be showing any gross images or anything like that, just that I'm going to be talking a lot about anal. Other types of sex as well, but mostly anal. So, my name's Matt. I'm a PhD student at Liverpool John Moores University in the Public Health Institute. My PhD is looking at the sex and lifestyles of LGBT people, specifically sexualised drug use among LGBT people. And so for part of my PhD, I designed the Sex and Lifestyle Survey. So I'm just going to be talking a bit about that today. So a bit of background to my study. Sexualised drug use in chemsex has become an emerging public health issue among men who have sex with men. So chemsex is a specific type of sexualised drug use, which involves the use of GHB or GBL, crystal meth, methadone, or ketamine taken immediately before or during sex. And it's been associated with a number of sexual risk-taking behaviours, such as condomless anal intercourse, having sexually transmitted infections, living with HIV, and accessing PrEP or PEP. So PrEP is pre-exposure prophylaxis, which someone would take before being exposed to HIV to reduce their chances of acquiring HIV, and PEP is something taken after exposure to HIV to reduce their chance of acquiring HIV. So reasons suggested for engagement in sexualised drug use and chemsex, such as internalised stigma and discrimination, may also apply to women who have sex with women and trans people, but these groups have received very little research in comparison. And research into sexualised drug use has often neglected the impact on psychological well-being. So from a public health perspective, it's important to know the sexual health associations with sexualised drug use to prevent onward transmission, but it's also equally important to understand how this affects someone's psychological health. And therefore, the aim of this part of my research was to investigate sexualised drug use and chemsex among all LGBT people and how this impacts on physical and psychological well-being. So, for my methods, I designed an online survey. I used Facebook advertising to recruit participants. So you can see there's an advert for men who have sex with men, an advert for women who have sex with women, an advert for trans and non-binary people, and an advert for LGBT people generally. And people would click on this advert and this would take them to the survey. Community organisations also promoted the survey on their social media accounts to help with recruitment, and there was an incentive of a prize draw of Amazon vouchers to also aid in recruitment. So when people were filling out the survey, one of the questions was, in the past 12 months, have you taken any of the following? And there was a list of 14 substances, so alcohol, cocaine, heroin, Viagra, and if a participant reported any of these substances apart from alcohol, this was marked as taking drug use in the past 12 months. And then participants were also asked if they'd taken any of these substances immediately before or during sex in the past 12 months. And again, any substance but alcohol was marked as sexualised drug use. And then if a participant reported taking ketamine, GHB, GBL, methadone or crystal methamphetamine immediately before or during sex, this was marked as engaging in chemsex. So in terms of the results, I had over 4,600 surveys started and 3,500 completions. So that's a completion rate of 78%. And this just shows the breakdown per group. So you've got men who have sex with men, women who have sex with women, and trans people. So these groups aren't mutually exclusive. So if a trans man also reported as having sex with other men, they were grouped as a trans person and a man who has sex with men. There's a slightly young mean age to my sample, and the vast majority of my sample were white ethnicity. In terms of drug use, 56% of men who have sex with men reported engaging in drug use in the past 12 months, compared to 39% of women who have sex with women and 44% of trans people. 40% of men who have sex with men had engaged in sexualised drug use in the past 12 months, compared to 21% of women who have sex with women and 18% of trans people. And then men who have sex with men were 10 times more likely to report of having engaged in chemsex in the past 12 months compared to women who have sex with women or trans people. So in terms of analyses for men who have sex with men, I looked at factors associated engaging in sexualised drug use, and then looked at factors of engaging into chemsex compared to sexualised drug use. So this is the analysis for sexualised drug use. So any column that's in green is where there's a significant difference in that group. So as you can see, 52% of those aged 35 to 49 reported engaging in sexualised drug use in the past 12 months, and they were significantly more likely to report engaging in sexualised drug use, as were those who were aged over 50. Engaging in sexualised drug use is also associated with an STI diagnosis in the past 12 months and having attended a sexual health clinic. And it was also associated with an increasing number of condomless male anal intercourse partners. Engaging in sexualised drug use was also associated with having taken image and performance enhancing drugs in the past 12 months. And then 72% of those who reported taking PrEP had engaged in sexualised drug use in the past 12 months, and 74% of those who were HIV positive. And engaging in sexualised drug use was also associated with reporting experiencing sexual contact without consent, or being unsure of experiencing sexual contact without consent in the past 12 months. And then so in terms of factors associated with chemsex compared to sexualised drug use, participants who reported a country of birth that was not the UK were more likely to report engaging in chemsex. Again, those that had received an STI diagnosis or had attended a sexual health clinic, as well as those who had engaged in more condomless anal intercourse, were more likely to report engaging in chemsex. And engaging in chemsex again was associated with taking PrEP or being HIV positive, as well as being unsure whether they had received sexual contact without consent in the past 12 months. So in terms of analyses for women who have sex with women, because there was such a small proportion that reported engaging in chemsex drugs for sex, I looked at factors related to drug use and then factors related to sexualised drug use compared to drug use. So for this graph, any of the columns that are purple are where there's a significant difference. So engaging in drug use among women or sexual women was associated with identifying as bisexual or queer, having a country of birth that was not the UK, having high internalised homophobia, and as well as increasing levels of psychological distress, an increasing number of female sexual partners, and 69% of those that had experienced sexual contact without consent in the past 12 months among women and sexual women had engaged in drug use in the past 12 months. And so in terms of factors related to sexualised drug use compared to drug use, identifying as bisexual, having your highest educational achievement at 16 was associated with sexualised drug use, as was an increasing number of female sexual partners, and again, experiencing sexual contact without consent. So unfortunately I don't have time to go through the trans analyses as well, but the same analyses that were conducted for women as sexual women were also conducted for trans people. So factors related to drug use among trans people were quite similar, so experiencing sexual contact without consent in the past 12 months. And sexualised drug use among trans people were associated with an increasing number of male anal intercourse partners, as well as female sexual partners, and receiving an STI diagnosis and attending a sexual health clinic. So in terms of a discussion of the results, engaging in sexualised drug use and chemsex is a variable experience, but support services should be available for men who are sexual men who need it. So there wasn't strong evidence that engaging in this behaviour was particularly harmful for someone's psychological health, although engaging in sexualised drug use was associated with a lower satisfaction with life among men who are sexual men, and 17% of those who reported engaging in chemsex stated that it was having a negative impact on their life. So support services should be available for those who want further help. Further research is needed to explore the relationship between sexual assault and drug use among women and sexual men and trans people. So we don't know the direction of this relationship yet. We don't know if using drugs makes someone more vulnerable to sexual assault, or whether people are using drugs as maybe a coping mechanism for after they've experienced sexual assault. So further research is needed so health policy can be properly informed. And as a general point, LGBT people beyond men who are sexual men should be included in sexual health and drug use research where appropriate. As far as I'm aware, this is the first piece of research, especially in the UK, that has included LGBT people in sexualised drug use research, and it's found some interesting and novel findings that can be used to inform health promotion and health practice. And LGBT research should aim to be more representative of LGBT people of colour. So, starting my recruitment method, I had no idea that that would result in such a bias in my sample in terms of ethnicity. But if I were to do it again, I would definitely contact LGBT community organisations specific for LGBT people of colour to try and overcome that bias somehow. If anyone's interested in any further reading, I've currently got 4 papers published from this part of the survey. So the Men Are Sexual Men and the Women Are Sexual Women paper there, they're based on findings that you have seen today. For the trans paper, I did something a little different. I looked at barriers to sexual health care and HIV testing among trans people in the UK. And I've also got a paper discussing PrEP in the context of sexualised drug use. So I just want to say a quick thank you to the participants who took part in the survey. Thank you to the community organisations that helped with the design, promotion and recruitment for the survey. And thank you for listening.
Two really different but very interesting papers from our new network. Does anybody have any questions for either Matt or Billie Jean about the research? Yay! Where's the mic? Oh, there it's on.
Hi, thanks very much. Really interesting research shared with us, so thank you very much. I just wanted to pick up on something that you were talking about, Billie Jean, that and goes to the first speakers before. We're living in a feeling of, there's a lot of hate around at the moment, isn't there? And I think that actually talking out and speaking about our journeys and our feelings is something that's extremely important, and allyship is extremely important. What I found really interesting was that the general demonstrations of acceptance that they were seen within journalism, and actually we're not talking about anything new here at all, are we? No. And I just wanted to make that comment really, that there's a lot of good people out there, and I just thought that was really interesting that you raised that within your research.
Yeah, to be completely honest, just as a quick response, I was really surprised. I wasn't anticipating the sort of acceptance and the celebration really. However, the celebration in terms of the newspapers seem to be supportive of female to male gender passing, but not male to female. So there's one particular case of an individual who identifies both male and female at different points in their lives, and when they're described as being female in the press, they're described as it, that, animal. Now when they're described as identifying as male, they're a hard worker, they're supportive, they're a husband, they're a provider. So it's quite interesting to see that juxtaposition, and it's something that I would like to look at further in a different different thing. But initially, yeah, I was really surprised at that level of acceptance. Really, they've tended to focus very specifically on this role of being a provider, being a supporter, and being the sort of man of the house, and that seemed to be really championed through them. But yeah, not the other way.
Yeah. I probably don't need that. So I think it would be great to have that research presented at the Transfer Visibility. Okay. I'm sort of involved in that arranging, so I'll get in touch with Matt Exley and people will get involved with that. I don't know whether the programme is complete now, but maybe for next year, because I think it's so good and it needs to be heard.
More than happy.
And also, I'd really like to invite you to the Transhelpmate side group, which I still take, and they will probably do. Sounds like
you do need mine.
I do need mine. Okay, sorry. So I was just saying it would be really good to be showcased isn't quite the right word, but it would be good to hear the research at the Trans Day Visibility event, which I suppose we need to give it a plug. It's going to be at the Museum of Liverpool on the 28th of March in the afternoon. I don't know that the programme has space to bring that in this year, but definitely it would just be great, and also great to see that people are researching this. I think it's important to have that historically. But get in touch with Matt Exley as well, because he'd probably be really interested in somehow getting this out there. So thanks for that. And I also just said that I facilitate the Transhelpmate side group, and they'd be really interested to hear that. And then I'm really interested, as I'm sure my colleague Serena have over there, and we're representing Sahir House. There's Lucy as well, and I'd be really interested to have copies of that, because that will inform us, and given that that's Liverpool, that'd be great as well, so thanks for that.
I just want to ask, as for the research hub, so following on from that, how do internal staff get involved in the research hub, and how do externals draw upon what's being discussed within the research hub to get it out there to the wider community?
I'm going to pass that up to you.
So the answer, so the first part was about internal, wasn't it, and how the staff get involved. So the heads are great leader. Oh no, his name's going to escape now, which is really bad.
Is it Nick?
Yeah, Michael Birchall. So Michael Birchall is a member of staff who has 1 foot in the Tay and 1 foot in LGMU, and he's done the Stonewall Leadership, and as part of the Stonewall Leadership course, he promised to set up a research network, which he's done. If any staff internally are interested in joining us, we have our own Canvas site, and they can just drop me an email, or they can send Michael Birchall an email and come along to one of our meetings. We're kind of interested in generating funding. We're a network for support as well, I would say, but we're only just kind of getting going, so it's early days. In terms of how our stuff works externally, we're still noodling around with how we share what we're doing. with people outside of the university. So it's a kind of watch this space at the moment. Our ambition is vast. Our funding is limited. So you know, we have grand plans, but yeah, as yet not quite there. So yeah. Next year we'll be.
We only had 3 meetings.
Yeah,
so
we
we're literally that new.
But yeah, watch this space. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Very good. Do we have any further questions for our researchers? Yes.
Hello. Just a question from Matt. Because I know you then went on and did some interviews. I'm not going to ask you to sum up findings or anything of those. But just interested in, given that some of these issues and the drugs that you're talking about are illegal, there's an awful lot of stigma around these. How did you find recruiting people? How did you find talking to people? Were people open, willing to come forward, things like that?
So in terms of, so basically at the end of this survey, there was an option to select to take part in further research, and I recruited about 9 or 10 participants through that. So participants who had already taken part in this research were very forthcoming. When it came to recruiting through charity organisations, it was a mix. It was either people really didn't want to talk about it, or people really wanted their opinions on it heard. So yeah, that was, what was that? Was that
Yeah, I just think it's interesting, given because I work in the same office as Matt, and as public health researchers, researching kind of highly stigmatised, sometimes illegal activities. It's really interesting what some people are incredibly willing to talk about, and then other people very reluctant to talk about. I know you have some interesting experiences around that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people actually use their interviews as an opportunity to talk about how they didn't like the drugs were illegal, and how this was stigmatising, and how people don't want to talk about sex and people don't want to talk about drugs. So combine them together and no one wants to talk about it. So yeah, just getting those voices out there, I guess, was the aim of the second part. Thank you.
Any further questions?
Yeah, I do. Sorry. I'll speak loud, if that's okay. So just to say, I always speak dead loud into the microphone. So just to say, so my concern would be, just because I'm a patient rep on various things as well, so I've got that head on. So when you're doing research like that, you ask people to come forward, there may be sensitive, self-seeking questions, yeah. I'm assuming that you directed people to the appropriate places, and would there be a component for people next time you do research to have availability of counselling or that kind of thing, because just being on your, so please understand that I'm a patient rep on other things, and I you know, it's just that not doing research for research sakes, but actually changing and making things better for people in the research groups that you're, you know, it's just coming from that place.
Yeah, so in terms of your question around the disclosing information and support organisations, like there were a list of support organisations at the end of the survey, and as well when doing the interviews they got a participant information sheet, they referred on to organisations for further help. Like, but in terms of conducting the interviews, I'm not a trained counsellor, so I'm very limited in what I can do. One participant did get upset in the conversations, not necessarily related to drug use. He was talking more from like a loneliness perspective as to why he was upset. And so my responsibility of a researcher there was to just, he was already in contact with the LGBT Foundation in Manchester, so I could be like, actually these do really good groups for you, so just refer onwards to that in case he did want any further help. There's another part of your question as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that totally answers. I mean, I know that you're limited, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
but you are, obviously that's a very sensitive situation, and you are do one of two things. Maybe all of those two things, or maybe three things actually, by that area of consent when people are engaging in sexualized sexual activity, drug-based sexual activity, particularly chemsex. So
I mean, I just highlight Dean Street and everything that Dean Street do. So if you don't know Dean Street, YouTube Dean Street and YouTube David Stewart, and he talks about what goes on behind potentially the need to engage in, or the desire to engage in chemsex, what that might be around internal stigma for people. But it can unleash, was I the person who did not consent, or was I the person who was the protagonist? And I can't quite remember which of those. Maybe I've been that one time, and maybe I've been that another time, and maybe I'm a bit both. And I just know it can put people in a really strange space, and so I'm just acknowledging that, because it's a very tender, difficult place.
So in terms of the interviews, I didn't bring up the issue
sure.
of consent unless they came forward with it. Interestingly, I also conducted interviews with sexual health workers, and some of them said the same thing as you. It's making note that you can become vulnerable in these situations, but you can also make other people vulnerable without wanting to. And so just giving people the knowledge and awareness that that is an issue that goes on at these parties, and hopefully that in itself can reduce those experiences.
Thank you.
Can we thank Billy and Matt for sharing their research with us today? Before we move on to our final speakers, we have a special guest in the room. Anna Rothery has joined us. She is the Lord Mayor of Liverpool, and I'm going to allow her to say a few words, give us some of her wisdom today. So please welcome our Lord Mayor.
I don't know about wisdom. Sorry guys, I wasn't prepared to do a speech today. I was just coming in to sit on, listening. But I mean, what I can say is I'm known for my, I think over 30 years of commitment to equality. And my theme as Lord Mayor this year is continuing that around equality and ensuring that the city, and when I say the city, I mean also City Council, because we get invited to events and everybody nods in agreement. We're all about equality. We all want to make everybody feel at home and feel inclusive. And then we go away and we don't do much with it, So we come across as sympathetic, empathetic, whatever you wish. But in terms of changing policies and how we do business, so that we affect real change and real security for people from different backgrounds, then that's a completely different story. But certainly that's where my story begins, and it will be where my story ends, because I'm one of those really boring people who likes dotting the I's and crossing the T's. And so whilst I do a lot of work outside, speaking at functions and events, etc., you can often find me in a back room somewhere plowing through the policies within Liverpool City Council and looking at how we can actually make life better on a day-to-day basis. And so what I've managed to use at my disposal, which is probably the best way to deal with issues, because it's the path of least resistance, and I've used the Social Value Act as a tool to challenge equality, or challenge inequality, I should say. And so I've been able to use that and adapt that so that when we look at contracting and procurement arrangements, etc., through City Council, that we reflect in our contracting and procurement literature, etc., that our preferred providers are not necessarily the people who come in with the cheapest cost, but it's about that social element and how they demonstrate to us about inclusivity and how that works in practice. And that can really affect lots of change, around equality, but more importantly around economic equality. And for me, that is really where the issue lies, because what's the point of having equality if you haven't got the wherewithal or the finance to participate in what we do in the city and what we do nationally? And so I've been a good friend. I think I've been a good friend to John Moores over the years around the equality strands, and you probably know that I'm the first black Lord Mayor in the city, which is an achievement. However, it's kind of double-edged sword really, because people's perception is, oh, she's a black Lord Mayor and she only deals with black issues. I just want to set the record straight on that. I don't. You know, equality for me takes different shapes and forms, and you know, yes, I am a black woman, but equality for me is about equality for everybody. And so in my pursuit of equality, I've spent the last 15 years as an elected member in the city, and before that 20 years within community politics, fighting for the same objective. And I will continue to do that, and I will continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with all of our community across the city and beyond. And I hope to be a continued critical friend and supporter for the Equality Initiative. So I'll leave it there. Thanks very much.
Thank you. That was a nice surprise, wasn't it? So last but not least, it really is last but not least, we have our newly minted co-chairs of the LJMU LGBTIQ Staff Network, Ray Burns and Kath Bonser. And we also have Martha Bratley with us, who is John Moore's Student Union Trans and Non-Binary Officer. So I'm going to invite them to come up and say a few words. Thank you.
We're a bit behind. There we go. I wish I could just stand up and do a presentation like that without practice. I've been practicing all morning. And I'm changing my research. My research is into apprenticeships, and I'm at the same stage as you, writing up. But yours sounds far more interesting, so I'm going to do that instead. So good afternoon, a bit late in the day for saying good afternoon. But really just on behalf of the staff network, Ray and myself would just like to join with everybody else in saying that we're really pleased to be hosting this event and working with EDI to present these sorts of events and celebrate LGBT History Month. Ray and myself are new to our roles and really finding our feet, but Holly, who's just left the room, and Moni have been great in helping us get sorted and starting. We really hope that we can contribute to the network with the LJMU staff and hopefully students as well. And really our goal, our number one goal for this year is to build awareness of the network. And I should have clicked on, here we go, okay. We currently actually only have about 40 members of staff that are active members of the network, and we know that there are far more members of staff in the university that are part of our family, if you will. We also have about 20 members of staff that have come forward and said that they would like to be allies. But if you work here, you'll see that there are far, far more people than that wearing our new lanyards. So we know that the community is a great big community within the university, and we just want to make more awareness of that and bring people in and do things that are important to our community. We're still looking for more people to help us out and make that difference. Phil Backstad, who we thought was going to make it here, but is obviously still not done, has offered to carry on and work on organising Pride for us. As you'll see, I've got my Pride t-shirt on that we had last year. Ray's doing a great job with the social media and marketing, but we'd love to have more people come through and be what we're calling community liaison people in helping to build content and work with the staff in marketing to create our own web page for the network. We also have great support, as I've said already, from Moni and Holly there to make sure that we do our job properly as the chairs and really build a strategic role for the group and make sure that we're discussing all the relevant matters for staff in the university. It is a network for staff, by staff. So it's our agenda and we can decide what it is that we would like to do. I'm not keeping my notes either, there we go. We have official aims and objectives for the network. I'm not going to read through all of those, but we're going to pick out some of those to talk to you a little bit about. But really what our aim is to promote a safe environment for every person, whether they're part of the LGBT community or not, but really about embracing everybody's diversity in the university and the local wider community, which is an area where I don't think we do particularly well. So we do want to make connections and build networks with people that are in our community around Liverpool. We will always, I think probably one of the big things that we have on here is we will always be campaigning for zero tolerance against homophobic, biphobic and transphobic bullying and harassment. As a lecturer, I've been here now 8 years in the business school, and some of my students have gone through quite horrific experiences here in Liverpool. The worst one being one of the young lads being knocked off a wall and really having quite a serious brain injury, and took quite a long time to recover. We don't want that. We don't want it in our community. Finally, from my point of view, Ray's going to take over in a minute, is just to show you that we are making progress. We are making people aware of our group. And actually, last year, Liverpool Pride, we had a great group of people that came out, despite the absolutely appalling weather for any of you that were there. And we'd like to really strengthen our presence again this next year, and continue to strengthen this, working with the network. Encourage more allies to come along. I don't think we had many allies come with us that day. And obviously and I know that you're going to talk about the student side of it as well. Students join us as well. So we don't want it to just be staff. We want students to be part of that as well. Okay, over to you.
Hi everyone. So part of the network is to improve life here in the university, and one way that we're currently aiming to do that is our new gender diversity policy that is in its final stages of development, which we were hoping we would have been able to launch here, but everybody knows about red tape and the university is no different. So we are in the final stages of the gender diversity policy, and I'm very proud of the work that we've done in it, and I'm really looking forward to it being released. So it's a very supportive document, and it's based on real life case studies for examples, so everything's going to be laid out easily for people. It's for staff and students who are going through transition. So, it is there to support them and to provide a safe space within the university where they can where people can freely talk to us and get the support they need. It also supports management and service teams along the way. It goes through, meets the current transition in legislation, which is really, really good, and it promotes work training and awareness. So it is something that we're still working in, but it should be out soon.
It's going to be ELT next.
Yeah, it's going to be ELT soon.
So good, I'll have few days.
So yeah, it is good, and this is what the network does. We work on change and try and develop and make the university a better, more inclusive space to be in. So, another part of our role is to promote EDI training for the EDI team. So these are the current workshops that are coming up. So staff and students are allowed to register onto them. So if there's anything that you really just join up, come along, have a bit of fun, and you might learn something. So there is so the transgender transgender awareness workshops, half a day. Yeah. The dignity at work is a half day. The unconscious, I think they're all half days, but they run 2 sessions on the same day. So you can go to an AM session or a PM session. So, but they're all online. So at the LJMU LibCal, or you can scan the QR code into your QR reader and it will take you off there. Off support services. So we promote support services that we have ties to, and one of the things me and Kath wish to do this year is make the network more visible, not only across the university, but also in the LGBT community within Liverpool as well, and Manchester, because there's some fantastic support services for LGBT plus community in Manchester, and anyone can go and use those services. They're not limited to just being in Manchester. So we want to extend our reach and our support and make us stronger and more visible, not just within JMU, but in the wider community as well. So, last bit from me. So after here, we've arranged for a social gathering at Kitty's Bar just down the road. So everyone's welcome. Please come, have chat, speak to all the people that have been here presenting today if they can make it. And we've also arranged a karaoke competition where you can win a £30 bar voucher. So I'm not trying to bribe you or anything. And since Phil's in the room, he might buy the first round.
I've got the corporate card.
So I'm Martha, I'm the trans non-binary students officer within the student union. I was selected in October. And before I do a presentation, I just want to say a personal thank you to Christian for sharing your story, because a lot of what you said I can relate to as well. So massive thank you, and yeah, really brave for you as well. Thank you. What I do in my role is I work through the student union to support trans students and non-binary students, and I also work with the uni to make changes, some of what I'll speak about in a sec. So I've got a quick video that's actually being released today on the student union social media as well. Hi, I'm Martha, your transgender non-binary officer. Today I'm asking for your help in the fight for transgender non-binary rights, but also acceptance. Over the next month you're going to see a lot of media regarding the Transgender Day of Visibility. You might think a month is a large amount of time just for one small section of the LGBTQ+ community, but really it is needed more than ever to reverse a worrying trend. Between 2018 and 2019 there was an 81% rise in transgender hate crime. The thought process behind this, as recently as this month, is being spread by the mainstream media. Transgender people, especially trans women, are being referred to as paedophiles. This is not new. This was spoken about the gays and lesbians 40 years ago. So let's not wait another 40 years before we're accepted. We can reverse this worrying trend through education and discussion with those with opposing views. But we must not let ourselves attack these people. We need to let these people know that transgender people are very real, but also very respectful as well. So please share this video, not only with fellow students, your family, your friends, but also your followers, because this is not a university issue, it's not a UK issue, it's not a Europe issue, this is a worldwide issue that needs fixing. So please share. Thank you. So apologies for how quiet it was, but yeah, so a few of the things that you will see in the next month for Trans Day of Visibility is every Monday and Friday on the Student Union social network we're going to go through a timeline of trans history events, so like the first male to female surgery, the first female to male surgery, and so on. We also have a banner that arrived Monday, I think, and it's amazing, so we're sending that round to all the societies to have pictures with and hopefully get comments from the committee members of those societies as well. And another thing that I've been pushing as well, which is probably, for me personally, it's my biggest achievement, is hopefully before the end of this semester, but definitely before the start of next year, is the university will start introducing inclusive toilets. So the disabled toilets will become inclusive. So it's essentially just a rebranding of sorts, but it takes a stigma away from the word disability, and that was it's sort of a collaboration with Ellie May, who's the disability officer as well. But then it's also got the symbol for transgender, so it also, for people who don't feel comfortable going into male or female, they've got a toilet that they feel comfortable using, and they don't feel they're taken away from disabled people as well. So I think that's my biggest achievement I've achieved so far. So I think that's everything for me. Thank you.
Before we I attempt to kind of sum up really and talk about where we go from here. Does anybody have any questions for our last three presenters about the networks that they're involved with, or what the student union is doing, or? No. Okay. You said everything you needed to say. It's fine. Okay, so just a couple of closing words then really. And we probably have got a bit of time right at the end for any more questions for anybody that's spoken today, if you have burning kind of things that you want to ask. I just want to say thanks again to everybody for spending the afternoon with us really. These events aren't one-off, they happen every year. We want them to happen every year. We have the institutional support for them to happen every year. So you can support us by coming to them and asking insightful questions as you have done today. If you have suggestions for events that you want to see, please feel free to email us using that email address there, so equality@lgmu.ac.uk. Holly and Moni will be glued to their PCs waiting for the emails to fly in. But seriously, we're really open to kind of what do you want to see, what would you come to, and we'll go with it generally as long as it's not completely off the wall. Also check news and communications for LGMU. We're really active in terms of what we're doing, in terms of having a really positive pro-LGBTQ presence on the web, in terms of things that we're doing, and again we're really well supported, so check news and communications for John Moores. And just, keep up the good fight really. It feels pretty grim at the moment, but there are people in this room, all of you, who make it slightly brighter, so don't give up even though you feel like there's nothing that can be done, because there can. So hold on to that, I think is what I would say. Thank you very much once again for coming today.